Okay, Boker Tov. We're going to start today's Daf Yomi on the top of Vav Amud Aleph, on top of 6a, where the Gemara is commenting on the line of the Mishnah. The Mishnah, after it lists the four Avos Nezikin, the four primary categories of damages, the Gemara then lists, the Mishnah then says, the common denominator of all these characteristics, of all of these cases, the common denominator is that it's their manner to do damage, and you're responsible for them. So from the fact that it says the common denominator means to say it's coming to include another case. What's the other case that it's coming to include? Suye Mai asks the Gemara on 6a, 2 lines from the top. What's it coming to include? So Amar Abaye says it's coming to include Lasuye, Avno, Sakino, Umaso. It's coming to include his stone or his knife or his object, Sheinichan Berosh Gago, that he left them on a rooftop, V'naful Beruach Mitzuya, and then a regular wind, an expected wind came along, and then it caused them to fall off. Viziko, and they did the damage. So the Gemara says, well, what's the case that we're talking about here? That we need this common denominator to learn out that case. What's the exact scenario? What's the scenario? If these objects, let's say this knife, fell, and while it was falling, it did the damage, isn't that exactly the same case as fire? Meaning to say it's a subcategory of fire, because why is it different than fire? Why is it different than fire? Fire is a dangerous thing, and then there's a wind that comes along with it. And it's your money, it's your responsibility. So this knife also is dangerous. And then they get the wind. It's your money, your responsibility. So it must be that the scenario is pasur denaichi. Must be that the scenario is after the knife rested on the ground, and then it hurt something. Let's say it hurt an ox or something. Well, why would we need a special case, the common denominator, to teach us that? If we're talking about a case where he declared his knife ownerless, then Bein Rav, Bein Shmuel, they're going to have an argument that both on Daf Kaf Ches coming up. They both are of the position, Hainu Bor. If you made it ownerless, then they are both of the position that that's a pit, because both of them say that any takoa, any damage that you declared ownerless, we learn out from a pit that you're liable. Just like you're liable for a pit in the public domain because it's hefker, so too you're liable for something that you declared ownerless. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, ma'ishna bor, why is this different than a bor? That at a pit, at the outset, at its inception, it does damage, and it's your money and your responsibility. This is the same thing as bor. It should have been your responsibility to watch it. So if you want to say, if we're talking about a case where you didn't declare it ownerless, if that's what we want to say we're talking about, well, if that's the case, according to Shmuel the Amar, Shmuel there says later on, Kulam miboro amanu. Shmuel says, even if you didn't declare it ownerless, we learned it out from pit, or hainu bor. Though this then is the exact same case as pit, and you don't need to learn out from the common denominator. And according to Rav, the Gemara doesn't say this, but according to Rav, who on Chaf Ches says that if you don't declare it ownerless, you're going to be responsible from the category of goring. Then you don't ask, why does Rav need to learn out from the common denominator? Because goring by itself, you wouldn't be able to learn it out from it. Because you could say, this is how the Tosfos comments, because you could have said, just like goring, which is alive and its intent is to damage, it's different than this case of the knife. So according to Rav, you could learn it out from the goring and the pit combination. But according to Shmuel, who says everything is learned out from bor, so this is exactly the case of a pit. So the Gemara says, "Oh, no, you declared it ownerless." Well, if that's the case, then why isn't it the case of the pit? You need the common denominator because it's not the same case as a pit. Because malabor shekainin koach hachar me'urav bo tomer bahani shekoach hachar me'urav ben. Pit is different because pit has no other element in it that got it there. It was just you, whereas this knife has the wind that was mixed in with it that got it there. So Gemara says, so therefore, since you can't learn out from pit, learn out from a fire. But learn out from the fire, but you can't learn out from the fire. Why? Fire is something that moves, and this is not something that is natural manner is to move and do the damage. So therefore, learn out from bor. You need to learn out from the common denominator. Rava says, now this case called the tzara shaveh is indeed coming to learn out to teach us this case of the bor miskalvel beraglei adam. It's indeed coming to teach us the case of a pit or a dangerous element in the public domain that is kicked along by a person or an animal, beraglei behema. That's what we're running at from this common denominator. Again, here the Gemara asks, what's the scenario? If you declared ownerless, that's your pit. And why is it any different than bor? Why is it any different than pit? Just like a pit, from its inception, it does damage and it's your responsibility. So therefore, how's it different than a pit? If it's a case where you didn't declare it ownerless, according to Shmuel, that's pit. So therefore, so you declared ownerless. And we have to learn out the case of a bor miskalgal from a common denominator because lo dami labor. It's not the same case as a pit. Why? Malabor shekain masav garmelo. A pit is different because the pit, the damage was done by the man himself who did it. He dug it. Tomer bahani. How are you going to compare the pit to the case where it's a bor miskalgal? It's a pit that's rolling that somebody else kicked it. So Tomer Bahani She'emasav Garmo. His actions don't cause the pit. Somebody else caused it to roll. So therefore, we can't learn out from pit. So we'll learn out from an ox. Sure, yochiach, but you can't learn out from an ox because Mao Shor Shekain Darko Hazik. An ox is typically something that moves and does damage, unlike a pit. This is something that's typically stationary. So therefore, Bor Tochiach learn out from a pit, but you can't learn out from a pit because pit was all his action. So therefore, Chazar Din Lori Zekri Zed, the common denominator is how we learn it. Third approach, we're going to have a total of 4 approaches. Ravada Barava says, it's coming to teach us the following cases. They used to say that if you had your waste in your house, that in the winter, you were allowed to let the waste out into the public street because the public streets were basically just muddy thoroughfares, and your waste didn't ruin it. But in the summer, you weren't allowed to let it out because the summer the roads were nice. So it says the Gemara cited in the Brisa called Elu Shamro Post can be both saying Vikar from Marasin. All those cases where they allowed that you were allowed, whenever they said that you could open your gutters, that those people who had the right to open their gutters or clean out their manure piles. When did they allow them to do it? They weren't allowed to do it in the summer. They did it in the winter. But nevertheless, even though these cases, these people had permission, even though that they did it with permission, if they cause damage, they have to pay. So even though they had permission, if they cause damage, they have to pay. So that's the case. Now we're running out from the common denominator. Now because it says the Gemara, hey, what's this case? If we're talking about a case where you open up your gutters and the water flows out, and while it's flowing out, it does the damage, that's kochohu, that's his own strength. So that's his own power. And so therefore, since it's its own power, that's a case of Adam. That's Adam Amazik. That's the person who does the damage. So why do we need a special common denominator? Elabas or denayach. So it must be that after rest, that's where it does its damage. Then that's just a pit. Just like a pit from its inception does damage. It's your responsibility. This is also a pit. Ella. So rather, what is it? The lo afgarinu. So you didn't declare it owner. It's a shmuel damer kul mibaro manu hainabor. According to shmuel, that's a pit. So the Gemara says, okay, so what is it? Olam dafgarinu. So we're talking about a case where you opened up your waste, goes into the public domain, and you declared it ownerless. And yet it's not the same law as a pit. We can't learn out directly from a pit. Why? You can't learn out from a pit because malabor shekain shalom bershus. A pit you dig in the public domain without permission. And this you dug in the public domain with permission. You allowed this hazard to be in the public domain with permission. So therefore, Tomer Bahani Shaber. So therefore, we can't learn it out from a pit on top of Bava base. So it says the Gemara. So it says the Gemara, sure, Yochayach, learn out from an ox, but you can't learn out from an ox because Malan, sure. Shekin Darko Hazik, ox typically goes along and does damage, unlike this item, which typically doesn't go along and do damage. So therefore, learn out from a boar, Tochiach, because they're din, or Rizek. And so therefore, you have to learn out from the common denominator of boar and sure. Ravina comes up with a fourth explanation of what's the common denominator. What are we learning out? Asuye. So again, we're going basically chronologically. So we come to the last generation of the Amoraim, and Ravina says, no, we're going to include even the following case, that which we learned in the Mishnah Bava Metzia, the Tanan, Akos Selva, Ilan, Shenaflu or Shosaram. Let's say you have a wall or a tree that falls into the public domain, the Ziko, and it does the damages, Pater Milashan, there you're exempt, but Nasnu Osman. But let's say they told them, your tree is dangerous, mister. Please cut it down. We give you 2 weeks to cut down your tree. Your wall scares us. Cut it down. And then the wall fell down in that time, and damaged somebody's property while it fell down. We're going to say Pater. In that case, he's exempt because it fell down within that time. But if it falls down after we already told him to get rid of his tree, he's going to be responsible. Now, what's the case here? If he says this tree is ownerless, it's not my problem. I declared it ownerless. Well, then Beil Rav Beil Shmuel, that's going to be the case of a pit. Why is it any different than a pit? Pit, the damage is common, it's your responsibility. And if he didn't declare it ownerless, according to Shmuel, we would say it's a pit. So therefore, we're talking about a case where you declared the wall or the tree ownerless. But still, we say it's not a pit. A bore was created as a hazard. But Tomer Bahani, but these cases, you can't learn out from the pit because it wasn't created from the outset to be a hazard. So therefore, Shor Yochiach. So therefore, learn out from an ox. But you can't learn out from an ox. Why? An ox typically moves when it does its damage. So therefore, bor tochiach. So therefore, learn out from the pit. Then you can't learn out. You need to learn out from the combination of bor and shor. That if your tree falls on somebody else's property, if this was a tree that you were put on notice, then it's your responsibility to pay. But if you weren't put on notice, you don't have a responsibility to pay. Okay. When it says in the Mishnah, in all these cases, when the damage is done, the mazik is responsible. The mazik is responsible to pay for the damages. The mazik is the one who owned that object. So the Gemara asks the question: why does it say chav mazik? Why does it say that the mazik, the one who does the damage, is responsible? But it uses this strange language of chav mazik. Chayav mazik, by the way, it should say he's obligated, but using the normal word of chayav mazik, he's obligated to pay. So Amar Rav Yehuda Marav. Haitana, the author of our Mishnah is a Yerushalmihu. The author of our Mishnah is a Jerusalemite. The Tani Lishna Kalila. He uses an expression of Kalila. Kalila is a very short expression. So the Jerusalemites, they speak in a shortened expression. And that teaches us this idea. This teaches us this idea that people of Jerusalem speak briefly. And this teaches us a more powerful idea that everybody thinks, oh, if you speak longer, you're holier. No, the shorter you speak, the less you say, the holier the concept. That's the people of Jerusalem. Okay, now we said the Mishnah says that if he does the damages, the one who owned the property that was damaging, he has to pay nezik. He has to pay full damages. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis say, it says in the pasuk, Meitav Sadeu, Umeitav Karmo Yishoim. So that if a person Kiyaver Ish, if a person will send his animal to do damage in the field or vineyard of somebody else, and then Vishilach Es Be'iro, and then he sends forth his cattle, meaning to say his cattle will walk and will destroy another field. From the best of his field and the best of his vineyard, he has to pay. Tana Rabbana, Meitav Sadeo, Meitav Karmo Yishoim. The best of his field and the best of his vineyard, he has to pay. So asks the Gemara, Meitav Sadeo Shal Nizak, Umeitav Karmo Shal Nizak. So there are two people here. We have to just define these terms so everybody should know them. There's a mazik, and then there's a nizak. A mazik is the one who does the damage. A nizak is the one upon whom the damage is done. So when it says here that he has to pay from the best of the fields of the nizak and the best of the fields of the Nizak, the best of the vineyard of the Nizak, according to Rabbi Yishmael. So the Gemara's understanding of this, Rashi says right now, Shem Acha Aruga B'Sadeh. What's the understanding? Let's say he ate a patch of vegetables in his field. Shamin Aruga Meshubecha Shal Nizak. We take the best patch of the Nizak and we see Kama Yafa Achshavim Perusah. How much is this vegetable patch worth with its fruits? And now we say, okay, and now let's say it's worth with its fruits $100, without its fruits $50. But no single. We look at the best patch of the vineyard of the Nizak, and that's what the Mazik has to pay him, the depreciation. How much it's worth less now that those vegetables are eaten. That's the position of Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Kiva says, no. No, so Rabbi Akiva says what this means is that we collect from the best property of the mazik, meaning to say we evaluate the damage done according to what it is. And now let's say he owes him $100, but let's say the mazik says, I want to pay you for my real estate. So there he has to give him from the best, the mazik has to give him from the best of his lands and not the worst of his lands. So, and for sure, if he's paying back takdish. So first of all, Gemara says, let's analyze Rabbi Yishmael. Again, what did Rabbi Yishmael say? That if he has a vegetable field and he's missing now, the animal ate the vegetables from that field. So now we look at the best vegetable field of the Nizak and we look at what it's worth with its vegetables and now without its vegetables, and we make him pay the difference. So Rabbi Yishmael says, so the Gemara says, Rabbi Yishmael, I don't understand. Achal Shmeina. Let's say this animal ate the best quality produce, Mishalim Shmeina, then he has to pay that. Achal Kahusha, but let's say he ate just the worst ones, the Kahusha, Mishalim Shmeina, why does he still pay the Shmeina? I mean, it's if he ate Class A, he pays Class A. But if he ate Class C, he also pays Class A. That doesn't make any sense. So Amar Avidi Barab and Hachamay Skinan, Kagon Shal Achal, Aruga Ben Arugos, Voyadinan, Ikahusha Achal, Ishmeina Achal. The Mishal Shmeina. So Rav Idi Barav says, no, we're talking about a case we don't know for sure what he ate. He ate one of the vegetable patches, and so since we don't know, we make him pay the best, the value of though as though it's the best vegetables. So the Gemara says, but why? If we don't know what he ate, why do we make him pay from the best? There's a fundamental concept in damages. You want to get the money from somebody else. You want to get the money from somebody else. That's your responsibility to bring the proof. You're not bringing the proof here. So therefore, if you're not bringing the proof, why do you assume that you could take from his best produce, take the worst vegetables? That's all you know. You just know he ate vegetables. You don't know if it was the best or the worst. So therefore, it says, Edis the nizik kiziboris the mazik. No, we must be talking about a case where we're talking about a scenario where the nizak's best properties are equivalent to the worst properties of the mazik. That's what we're talking about. So let's read the Rashi. El Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov, Moed Rabbi Shmuel admits that you only pay the value of the vegetables that you ruined. What they're arguing about is, let's say, Kigon Shaita, Edis the Nizak, the best of the property of the Nizak was equivalent to the Ziboris the Mazik, was equivalent to the worst of the properties of the Mazik. Rabbi Shmuel says, but the Nizak Sheminan, he says, we look at the best properties of the Nizak, the Ksiv, Bekrash, Shalmo, B'nei Nizko, Mikarka, Meitav, from the best property, Asados to Nizakai. That refers to the best property of the person whose field was damaged. And therefore, the Mazik can pay from his worst property because that's equivalent to the best property of the Nizak. So therefore, Rabbi Shmuel said, Rabbi Kiva Savar b'the Mazik Shamin. Rabbi Kiva is on the position that you have to pay from the best of the properties of the damager. So the Gemara says, "My time, Rabbi Yishmael." What's the reason for Rabbi Shmuel? What's the reason why Rabbi Shmuel says you pay for the best of the properties of the Nizak, not the best of the properties of the Mazik? Because it says Sadel Mata Nemra Sadel Mata Nemra Sadel Mala. It says above, below it says Meitav Sadeh Yishalim, and it says also the word Sadeh in the pasuk says Ubir B'stei Acher. So it says both. So Ma Sadeh Moral Mala, just like it says he destroys another person's field, and that's referring to the Nizak. Af Sadeh Moral Mata. So too the verb word below Meitav Sadeh Yishalim is also going to be it's also going to be referred to the Nizak's property. Rabbi Kiva says, Meitav Sadeh Meitav Kamori Shalem. Rabbi Kiva says, no, you pay him from the best of the field and the best of his vineyard from the Maziks, the Hayach Kamashayim. It refers to the one who pays. The one who pays from the best of his vineyard. Rabbi Shmuel says, Ahanik Zer Shava Vahanikra. Rabbi Shmuel says, I need the pasuk, the word Sadeh to teach us you pay from the Nizak's property, Vahanikra, and I also need the pasuk because it says Mitav Sadeo that you pay from the best of his field. I need that pasuk also. Why? Hanik Zer Shava Hanikra, Hanik Zer Shava Kadekamina. I use the pasuk like I said that we value from the Nizak's property. But Hanikra, what do I use? Why do I need this pasuk of Mitav Sadeo? Mitav Karmo Yishalem. Why do I need that pasuk? What's it teaching us? Could go into Isla Mazik. Let's say there's a scenario where the Mazik has two classes of property. Isla Mazik Edis Viziboris. He only has class A and class C. The Edis Lenizik Viziboris the Mazik Shavya Ki Edis the Nizak. So let's say he has the Mazik only has the class A and class C property, and the Nizik himself only has class A property, but it's not going to be the same value of the Edis of the Mazik. So basically, the Mazik has class A and class C, and the Nizik only has one type of property, but it's not the equivalent. It's not as good as the Edis of the Mazik. So therefore, Ziboris the Mazik or Shavya Edis the Nizak. And the worst property, the class C of the Mazik, is not the same value of the property of the Nizak. And so we see that the Mazik has no real estate that's worth the best property of the Nizak. So therefore, you can either do something that's worth more or something that's worth less. Under these circumstances, we learn from the pasuk, the Mashal made of the day, that he should pay from his best property. He can't say collect it from my worst. He could say only collect it from my best. Okay, we'll stop here. The recording. Shkoyach, shkoyach. God willing, we'll pick this up at 8 a.m. again.